The fragrant aroma of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee drifted through the air of a bustling roadside diner in a suburban American town. Inside, the clinking of cutlery and murmur of conversations provided a cozy backdrop. At a corner table, the Jenkins family, a black family of 4, sat with cheerful anticipation, waiting for their breakfast order. It was a special morning for them. Samuel Jenkins, the father, had just returned from an extended work trip. His wife Karen and their 2 children, 10-year-old Mikey and 16-year-old Ava, were thrilled to have him back. The family had chosen this diner, Main Street Eats, based on its positive reviews and promises of hearty portions. Samuel, dressed in a modest button-up shirt and jeans, glanced at his kids with a warm smile. To the outside world, he appeared an ordinary man. However, Samuel's unassuming demeanor belied his role as a senior operative in the CIA, a job that had taught him patience, observation, and discretion. As the family chatted and laughed, their joy was interrupted by the sharp, clipped tone of the restaurant's manager, Mark Higgins, a middle-aged man with a rigid demeanor. His expression was neutral, but there was an undercurrent of tension as he approached their table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying a calculated politeness that didn't reach his eyes. "I need to see your payment method before we serve you." Samuel raised an eyebrow. "I beg your pardon?" "It's policy for certain orders," Mark replied, avoiding eye contact. Karen frowned, her smile fading. "But we haven't even received our food yet. Is this something new? We didn't notice any signs mentioning this." Mark hesitated, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "Well, I'm enforcing it now. If you can't prepay, I'll have to ask you to leave." The diner grew quieter as nearby patrons turned their heads. Some whispered, others exchanged knowing looks. It didn't take long for Samuel to notice that the same policy wasn't being enforced at any other table. "What's really going on here?" Samuel asked, his voice calm but firm. Mark's composure wavered. "Look, I don't want any trouble. If you can't comply, I'll have to call the police." Karen gasped, and Ava looked between her parents, her face a mix of confusion and anger. "Dad, this isn't right," she whispered. Samuel's eyes locked on Mark's. His instincts, honed by years of high-stakes negotiations and undercover work, told him this wasn't about policy. It was about prejudice. Yet he kept his tone measured. "Mark, is it?" Samuel asked. "I'd like to speak with the owner. I'm sure they'd want to know how customers are being treated." Mark stiffened. "I am the owner." The tension thickened. "Then it seems we've reached an impasse," Samuel replied. "Go ahead and call the police if you feel it's necessary." Mark stormed off, muttering something under his breath. True to his word, he dialed 911, his voice carrying through the diner as he described an uncooperative group causing a disturbance. Karen's hands shook as she reached for her husband's. "What do we do?" "We stay calm," Samuel reassured her. "Let's see how this plays out." Minutes later, 2 officers entered the diner, their presence commanding attention. Mark hurried over, gesturing animatedly toward the Jenkins family. The officers approached the table cautiously, their expressions neutral. "Good morning," one of them began. "We received a report about a disturbance. Can you tell us what's going on?" Samuel remained seated, his tone steady. "Certainly, officer. My family and I came here for breakfast. We were asked to prepay, a request that hasn't been made to any other customer. When I questioned the reasoning, the manager called you." The officer glanced at Mark, who seemed to grow more agitated under scrutiny. "They were being difficult," Mark interjected. "I'm just trying to protect my business." "And how exactly were we being difficult?" Karen asked, her voice cracking slightly. Samuel decided it was time to shift the dynamics. "Officer," he said, reaching into his pocket slowly and deliberately, "I'd like to show you my credentials." The officers tensed, their hands instinctively moving toward their belts. Samuel placed a leather wallet on the table and flipped it open, revealing his CIA badge. A hush fell over the diner. Mark's face turned pale. "I work in national security," Samuel continued. "I'd appreciate it if we could resolve this misunderstanding without further escalation." The officer nearest to Samuel examined the badge carefully, his demeanor shifting from cautious to deferential. "Of course, sir. Thank you for your cooperation." The other officer turned to Mark. "Is there a reason you singled them out?" Mark stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. I didn't mean anything by it. I was just—" "You were just what?" Ava interjected, her voice sharp. Trying to humiliate us in front of everyone? The officers exchanged glances before addressing Mark. Sir, this seems like a case of discriminatory behavior. We'll be filing a report. Karen squeezed Samuel's hand as the officers escorted Mark into the back room for further questioning. The diners erupted in murmurs, some offering apologetic glances to the Jenkins family. As the Jenkins family remained seated, the mood in the diner shifted. Conversations resumed, but the air felt charged with a mix of discomfort and curiosity. Karen leaned toward Samuel, her voice low. Do you think this will go anywhere? Or will it just get swept under the rug? Samuel looked at her with a steady expression. It's hard to say, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence lets things like this thrive. The truth needs a voice. Meanwhile, Mikey fiddled with a crayon he'd grabbed from the kids' menu, his earlier excitement replaced with confusion. Dad, he whispered, why didn't they like us? Samuel's heart tightened. He crouched down to his son's level, meeting his wide, innocent eyes. Mikey, sometimes people don't understand others who are different from them, and when people don't understand, they make bad choices. But that doesn't mean we let them win, okay? Mikey nodded slowly, his little fingers clutching the crayon tighter. Ava, sitting across from them, folded her arms. Her face was a storm of emotions, anger, embarrassment, and something else Samuel recognized. Determination. I'm so tired of this, Ava said, her voice breaking the tense quiet at their table. It's like we always have to prove something just to get treated like everyone else. Samuel reached for her hand. I know, Ava, but today we proved something important. Not to them, but to ourselves. We stayed strong and we didn't let them shake us. Karen looked at her daughter, her eyes softening. And we're not alone in this, honey. There are good people out there too. People who see us for who we are, not what they think we are. Ava glanced around the diner, noticing some customers looking at them with what seemed like genuine regret. An older white woman at the next table leaned over hesitantly. Excuse me, she said, her voice tentative. I just want to say I'm sorry for what happened. It's not right. Karen gave her a polite smile. Thank you. That means a lot. Outside the diner, the officers were wrapping up their report. Mark stood near the door, visibly agitated. His earlier bluster had been replaced by a nervous energy, as he spoke in hushed tones to the police. Samuel watched him through the window, noting every gesture and expression. Dad, Ava said, pulling his attention back. What are we going to do? We can't just let this guy keep doing stuff like this. We won't, Samuel assured her, but we're going to handle this the right way. Which means? Karen asked, raising an eyebrow. Samuel smiled faintly, the same way he did when a plan was forming in his mind. First, we document everything. Then we make sure the right people hear about it. Karen sighed but nodded. She knew that tone. It was Samuel slipping into his professional mindset, the one that had kept him safe in the most dangerous situations. Later that evening, back at the Jenkins family home, Samuel sat in his study surrounded by files and notes. He had made calls to a few colleagues, one of whom worked in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. The pieces were beginning to come together. Karen entered the room with a cup of tea, placing it beside him. How's it going? Samuel leaned back, rubbing his temples. It's going to take time, but we're not letting this slide. I've already got contacts who are willing to review the footage from the diner's cameras. Karen's lips tightened. Do you think the media will pick it up? They might, Samuel said, but that's not the goal. The goal is accountability, for Mark and anyone else like him who thinks this is acceptable. Karen smiled, proud of her husband's resolve. You always know how to make things happen. Team effort, Samuel replied, giving her hand a squeeze. Meanwhile, Ava had taken to social media, typing furiously on her laptop. She narrated the incident in vivid detail, describing not only the humiliation, but also the resilience her family had shown. Her post ended with a rallying cry. This isn't just about my family. It's about every family who's ever been judged, dismissed, or mistreated because of how they look. We deserve better, and we're going to demand it. Within hours, Ava's post began to gain traction. Friends shared it, and soon it spread beyond their immediate circle. Comments poured in, some offering support, others sharing similar experiences. By the next morning, the story had taken on a life of its own. Local news outlets picked it up, and Samuel's phone buzzed with calls from reporters seeking interviews. Initially reluctant, Samuel agreed to speak, framing the narrative as a call for awareness and change rather than a personal vendetta. At the same time, Main Street Eats faced a backlash. Reviews tanked as more people heard about the incident, and customers called for accountability. Mark's attempt to dismiss the family had not only backfired, but also opened a much-needed conversation about bias and discrimination in their community. The growing public attention brought both support and criticism, creating a whirlwind of emotions for the Jenkins family. While many rallied behind them, praising their courage and denouncing discrimination, others accused them of overreacting. Some comments online were filled with venom, questioning their integrity and accusing them of seeking attention. Samuel was no stranger to such backlash, having faced similar scenarios in his professional life. But watching his children navigate this new reality weighed on him. Ava, in particular, struggled. Her viral post had made her a lightning rod for both admiration and vitriol. "Dad, why do people hate us so much when they don't even know us?" Ava asked one evening, her voice heavy with frustration. Samuel sat beside her, taking a deep breath. "It's not really about us, Ava. People project their fears, their insecurities, and their ignorance onto others. It's easier for them to blame someone else than to look inward." Ava nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "It just feels like no matter what we do, it's never enough." Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "We don't fight for approval, Ava. We fight because it's the right thing to do. And sometimes doing the right thing means standing up, even when it's hard." While the Jenkins family tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, the pressure on Main Street Eats continued to mount. Protesters gathered outside the diner holding signs that read, "No room for hate," and "Equal treatment for all." Mark, now visibly rattled, issued a half-hearted apology through the diner's social media page. But the damage had been done. His attempt to save face only fueled more anger, as his words came across as insincere. Samuel observed the developments with a calculated eye. He wasn't interested in destroying the business. He wanted meaningful change. He reached out to community leaders, proposing a town hall meeting to address the broader issue of systemic bias in local establishments. The idea gained traction, and within days the meeting was scheduled at a community center. Flyers were distributed, and local media outlets announced the event. On the night of the town hall, the room was packed. Residents of all backgrounds filled the chairs, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity, concern, and determination. Samuel stood at the front, feeling the weight of the moment. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm but commanding. "This isn't just about what happened to my family. This is about creating a community where everyone feels valued and respected, regardless of their race, religion, or background." He shared the story of their experience at the diner, carefully avoiding personal attacks on Mark, but emphasizing the systemic issues at play. Bias, whether conscious or unconscious, affects us all. It erodes trust and divides us, but we have the power to change that, together. The audience listened intently. Several community members shared their own stories of discrimination, painting a vivid picture of the challenges faced by marginalized groups in the town. Meanwhile, Mark sat in the back of the room, his face drawn. He hadn't intended for things to spiral so far out of control, but now he was forced to confront the consequences of his actions. For the first time, he truly listened, hearing the pain and frustration in the voices of those he had dismissed for so long. When the floor was opened for questions, Mark hesitated before standing. The room grew silent as all eyes turned toward him. He cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "I want to apologize. To the Jenkins family and to everyone here. I acted out of ignorance, and I see now how much harm I caused. I can't take back what I did, but I want to do better. I'm willing to work with this community to make my diner a place where everyone feels welcome." The room erupted into murmurs. Some were skeptical, others cautiously optimistic. Samuel nodded, acknowledging the gesture. "Accountability is the first step," he said, "but words need to be backed by action." Mark nodded, his expression earnest. "I'll prove it." The following weeks saw a remarkable transformation. With Samuel's guidance, Main Street Eats partnered with local diversity organizations to conduct training sessions for its staff. Mark personally attended every session, listening and learning alongside his employees. The diner implemented a new policy to ensure fair treatment of all patrons, and Mark worked to rebuild trust within the community. He even invited the Jenkins family back for a meal on the house. though they politely declined. Samuel's focus remained on the bigger picture. He collaborated with the town council to establish a permanent committee dedicated to addressing discrimination in local businesses. Ava, inspired by her father's determination, joined the committee as a youth representative, eager to amplify the voices of her peers. As the dust began to settle on the incident at Main Street Eats, the Jenkins family found themselves navigating new opportunities and challenges. The incident had sparked a larger conversation, not only within their town but across the region. News outlets continued to cover the story, and Samuel was invited to speak at a nearby university on the topic of bias and its impact on communities. This, however, introduced a subplot that tested the family's resilience: the toll of public attention. While Samuel handled the spotlight with grace, the constant scrutiny began to wear on Karen and the children. Ava, in particular, found herself juggling the pressures of activism with her school responsibilities. One afternoon, Ava came home looking defeated. She tossed her backpack onto the couch and slumped into a chair, her usually bright demeanor replaced by exhaustion. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Karen asked, setting aside her book. Ava sighed. "It's just everything. People at school keep asking me questions like I'm some kind of expert on racism now. And some of them," she hesitated, her voice cracking, "some of them are saying really mean things, like I'm just trying to get attention." Karen moved closer, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "I'm so sorry, Ava. I wish I could protect you from all of this." "It's not fair," Ava continued, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted people to understand." Samuel, overhearing from the hallway, stepped in. "Ava," he said gently, kneeling beside her, "I know it feels overwhelming right now, but what you're doing matters. Change is hard, and not everyone will understand your intentions. But you're making a difference, even if it doesn't always feel like it." Ava wiped her eyes. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Dad. It's too much." "Then take a step back," Samuel said. "There's no shame in that. Fighting for what's right doesn't mean you have to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders. It's okay to rest." Meanwhile, Samuel faced his own challenges at work. Though his CIA colleagues were largely supportive, a few expressed concerns about the attention his family's story had drawn. One evening, his supervisor, Director Kelly, called him into her office. "Samuel, you know I respect what you're doing," she began, "but I need you to be aware of how this could affect your work. High-profile cases like this can draw unwanted attention to the agency." Samuel nodded, understanding the subtext. "I appreciate the concern, Director, but I've always kept my professional life separate from my personal life. This is about my family, my community. I won't let it interfere with my duties." Kelly studied him for a moment before nodding. "I trust you, Samuel. Just be careful." In the midst of these struggles, a surprising ally emerged. Sarah, one of the waitresses from Main Street Eats. She reached out to the Jenkins family through social media, expressing her regret for not speaking up during the incident. "I was scared," her message read, "but that's no excuse. I want to do better and I want to help." Karen was initially wary, but Samuel saw potential in Sarah's gesture. He invited her to join the diversity committee, where her first-hand perspective as an employee at the diner added valuable insight. Over time, Sarah became an outspoken advocate for change, earning the respect of the community and the Jenkins family. As the committee's work progressed, new complexities arose. They discovered that the issues at Main Street Eats were not isolated, but part of a larger pattern in local businesses. The committee decided to conduct a survey to gather data on discriminatory practices, sparking both support and resistance. Some business owners welcomed the initiative, seeing it as an opportunity to improve. Others, however, pushed back, accusing the committee of unfairly targeting small businesses. At one heated town meeting, a local business owner named Tom Sanders stood up, his voice laced with frustration. "Look, I'm all for treating people fairly, but this is going too far. You're making us look like racists when we're just trying to run our businesses." Samuel responded calmly, his tone measured. "Tom, this isn't about blaming anyone. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels welcome. Addressing bias benefits us all. It builds trust and strengthens our community." Tom muttered under his breath but sat down, the room buzzing with mixed reactions. Amid the growing tensions, the Jenkins family found moments of hope and unity. Mikey, inspired by his father's perseverance, wrote a short essay for his school's Heroes Project, choosing Samuel as his subject. "My dad is my hero because he stands up for what's right, even when it's hard," Mikey wrote. "He teaches me that being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you do the right thing anyway." When Samuel read the essay, his eyes filled with tears. It was a poignant reminder of why he continued to fight, not just for his community, but for his children's future. As the weeks turned into months, the Jenkins family began to see the fruits of their labor. The Diversity Committee's survey results led to actionable recommendations for local businesses, and the town council voted to implement new policies promoting equity and inclusion. Mark Higgins, once the face of resistance, became an unexpected advocate for the cause. Through his involvement in the committee, he gained a deeper understanding of his own biases and worked to rebuild his reputation. Months after the incident at Main Street Eats, the Jenkins family had found a rhythm. Their activism had helped create visible changes in the community, but the emotional scars of the ordeal lingered. Ava had stepped back from social media, choosing to focus on her studies and her new role on the Diversity Committee. Karen, ever the steady presence, continued to support her family through the ups and downs. Samuel remained the driving force behind their efforts, though even he occasionally felt the weight of their collective journey. But the turning point came on a brisk autumn morning, when Samuel received a letter from a prominent civil rights organization. The letter congratulated him on his work and invited him to accept an award at their upcoming annual gala in Washington, D.C. As Samuel read the letter aloud at the dinner table, the family's reactions varied. Karen beamed with pride, Ava's face lit up with excitement, and Mikey immediately asked if they'd get to visit a museum while in the Capitol. "This is a big deal, Dad," Ava said. "You have to accept." Samuel hesitated. "It's an honor, but this isn't just about me. This has always been a team effort. I'm not sure I'm comfortable taking credit." Karen reached across the table, placing a hand over his. "Samuel, you've worked tirelessly, not just for our family but for the entire community. Accepting this award isn't about ego. It's about showing people what's possible when we stand up for what's right." Samuel nodded slowly. "You're right. But if I'm going, I want all of you there with me." The trip to Washington, D.C. was a whirlwind. The Jenkins family marveled at the grandeur of the city, taking time to visit historical landmarks and museums. For Mikey and Ava, it was a chance to see the rich history of activism and progress that had paved the way for moments like this. On the night of the gala, the family dressed in their finest attire. Samuel wore a sleek black suit, Karen dazzled in an emerald green gown, and Ava and Mikey looked sharp in their formal outfits. As they entered the opulent ballroom, they were greeted with warm applause from attendees who had followed their story. The evening was a celebration of resilience and progress. Speeches were given, highlighting the importance of standing against discrimination and fostering inclusivity. When Samuel's name was called, the room erupted into applause. Samuel approached the podium, his heart pounding. He looked out at the sea of faces, pausing briefly to gather his thoughts. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "This award is not just for me, it's for my family, my community, and everyone who has ever been made to feel less than because of who they are." He shared the story of what had happened at Main Street Eats, framing it as both a challenge and an opportunity. "That day we were faced with a choice, to let the incident define us or to use it as a catalyst for change. We chose the latter, and while it wasn't easy, it was worth it." Samuel's words resonated deeply, drawing a standing ovation. For the Jenkins family, it was a moment of triumph, a validation of their efforts and a reminder of the power of resilience. But as the family basked in the glow of the evening, another challenge loomed. Unbeknownst to them, a journalist in attendance had been digging into Samuel's CIA background. While the reporter's intentions were not malicious, their investigation threatened to expose details of Samuel's work that were meant to remain classified. A week after the gala, Samuel received a call from a colleague at the agency. "Samuel, we've got a situation. Someone's been asking questions about your career and they're close to publishing a story." Samuel's stomach dropped. "What kind of story?" "Nothing incriminating, but it could compromise your privacy and possibly your safety." For Samuel, this was a critical turning point. He had to decide whether to push back against the story or let it run its course. He called a family meeting to discuss the implications. "This could change everything," he said, his tone serious. "If the story goes public, it could put us in the spotlight again, this time in ways we can't control." Karen frowned. "Is there any way to stop it?" "I could reach out to the journalist, explain the risks," Samuel said. "But that might draw even more attention." Ava spoke up, her voice calm but resolute. "Dad, whatever happens, we'll face it together. We've already shown we can handle tough situations." Samuel looked at his family, their unwavering support giving him the strength to move forward. In the end, Samuel opted to meet with the journalist, a young reporter named Elena Ruiz. Over coffee in a quiet cafe, Samuel shared his concerns about the potential fallout of the story. "This isn't about hiding anything," he explained. "It's about protecting my family and the work I do. I hope you can understand that." Elena listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "I appreciate your honesty," she said. "My intention wasn't to cause harm. I just wanted to highlight the human side of someone who's made a real difference." After some deliberation, Elena agreed to write a piece that focused on Samuel's community work, while omitting sensitive details about his CIA career. The resulting article painted Samuel as a dedicated family man and community advocate, further amplifying the positive impact of his story. While it brought renewed attention, it also reinforced the message of resilience and change that had become the hallmark of the Jenkins family's journey. The journalist's article, titled "Resilience in Action: The Man Behind the Movement," became a sensation. It painted Samuel Jenkins as a symbol of perseverance, highlighting not only his family's experience, but also the broader changes their actions had inspired in the community. The piece included heartfelt quotes from Samuel and Ava, emphasizing the power of standing up against injustice while remaining measured and solution-oriented. The Jenkins family braced for the aftermath. Public reactions were swift and widespread. The story brought waves of support, but also revived some of the negativity they had faced before. Social media exploded with comments, many applauding their courage, while others tried to discredit their motives. One morning, Karen scrolled through her phone at the kitchen table, reading the latest comments. "Samuel," she called, her voice a mix of exasperation and humor. "Did you know you're apparently part of a secret conspiracy to bring down small businesses?" Samuel chuckled, sipping his coffee. "It's amazing how creative people get when they're scared of change." Ava joined them, holding up her phone. "Look at this one," she said, reading aloud. "The Jenkins family is what America needs right now." She smiled. "See? Not all bad." Karen smiled, reaching over to pat Ava's hand. "It's a reminder that for every voice of hate, there's someone rooting for us." As the story gained traction, unexpected opportunities began to arise. Nonprofit organizations reached out to collaborate with Samuel on initiatives to address systemic bias. One group invited him to lead a workshop on conflict resolution and community building, a role that aligned perfectly with his skills. However, the attention also came with challenges. Ava and Mikey both felt the pressure of living in their father's shadow. Mikey, who had once been proud of his family's newfound recognition, began to withdraw from school activities, uncomfortable with the constant questions from classmates. "Why can't we just be normal again?" he asked Samuel one night. Samuel crouched beside Mikey's bed, his face softening. "I know this hasn't been easy for you," he said, "and I wish I could make it all go away. But what we're doing matters, Mikey. Not just for us, but for other families who might face the same thing." Mikey nodded reluctantly. "I just miss when people didn't know who we were." Samuel smiled, brushing his son's hair. "I get that. But remember, it's okay to feel this way. And if it ever gets too much, you let me know. We'll figure it out together." The community itself was undergoing significant changes. Inspired by Samuel's leadership, other towns began adopting similar initiatives to combat bias in local businesses. The Diversity Committee became a model for neighboring regions, and Samuel was frequently called upon to share their blueprint for success. Mark Higgins, the once controversial manager of Main Street Eats, surprised everyone with his transformation. He not only embraced the training programs but also became an outspoken advocate for inclusion. His efforts to rebuild trust paid off, and the diner began attracting a more diverse clientele. "I have Samuel to thank for waking me up," Mark admitted during a local news segment. "It's humbling to realize how much I had to learn, but I'm committed to being better." Despite these successes, there were moments of tension. At one town hall meeting, A vocal critic named Frank Wallace, a local businessman, challenged the committee's work. "All this talk about inclusion is just political correctness gone mad," Frank declared. "We're a small town, not some big city. We don't need outsiders telling us how to run things." Samuel stood up, his presence commanding but calm. "Frank, this isn't about outsiders. It's about neighbors looking out for each other. We're not here to impose rules. We're here to create a community where everyone feels they belong. Isn't that what small towns are supposed to be about?" Frank muttered under his breath but didn't argue further. The crowd erupted in applause, reaffirming their support for the committee's work. At home, the Jenkins family found solace in quiet moments together. Karen began journaling about their journey, capturing the highs and lows. Ava rediscovered her love for painting, using her art to express the emotions she often found difficult to articulate. Mikey, inspired by his father's strength, started volunteering at a local community center, helping other kids who felt out of place. For Samuel, these moments were a reminder of why he continued to fight. "The world may not change overnight," he told Karen one evening, "but if we can make things better for just one person, it's worth it." Karen smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You've done more than that, Samuel. You've changed this entire town." The ripple effects of their actions continued to spread, culminating in an invitation for Samuel to speak at a national summit on community activism. The Jenkins family once again found themselves traveling, this time with a renewed sense of purpose. As they sat in the audience, listening to other speakers share their stories, Ava whispered to her father, "Do you think we've really made a difference?" Samuel looked at her, his eyes filled with pride. "I know we have." The National Summit on Community Activism was held in a sprawling convention center, with attendees from across the country gathered to share their experiences and strategies for fostering social change. For Samuel and his family, it was both an inspiring and humbling experience. As they listened to other activists speak, they heard stories that echoed their own, a pattern of bias and prejudice confronted with courage and determination. Ava, who had spent months grappling with the emotional toll of their journey, began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. When it was Samuel's turn to take the stage, he spoke not only of the challenges they faced, but also of the resilience and solidarity that emerged from those challenges. "Change doesn't happen in isolation," Samuel said, his voice steady and confident. "It takes all of us working together, learning from one another, and committing to do better, not just for ourselves but for the generations that follow." His words were met with a standing ovation, and afterward, attendees approached him and his family to thank them for their bravery. As the family returned home, they found their community continuing to evolve. The Diversity Committee had implemented new initiatives, including scholarships for underrepresented students and programs promoting cultural exchange. Ava took an active role in these efforts, organizing events that brought people together through art and storytelling. One such event, a community mural project, became a focal point for healing and growth. Residents of all ages and backgrounds gathered to paint a massive wall in the town square, each contributing their own unique vision of what inclusivity meant to them. Mikey, who had initially been hesitant about the attention their family received, found joy in helping younger kids paint their sections of the mural. "This is pretty cool," he admitted to Samuel one afternoon, his hands streaked with vibrant colors. Samuel smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "It is. And it's because of people like you that this is happening." Karen, too, found her own way to contribute. She began hosting informal support groups for other families who had experienced discrimination, creating a safe space where they could share their stories and find solidarity. Over time, these gatherings grew into a formal organization, with Karen at the helm as its founder. "I never imagined myself leading something like this," she admitted to Samuel one evening. "You've always been a leader," Samuel replied, his tone full of pride. "You just needed the right moment to step into it." The family's growth wasn't without its setbacks. There were still moments of tension and frustration, especially as some parts of the community resisted change. At one point, graffiti defaced the community mural, with hateful messages scrawled over the vibrant artwork. When the family arrived to see the damage, Ava was visibly shaken. "Why do people have to ruin everything?" she muttered, her voice thick with anger. Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "This is exactly why we keep going," he said. "Hate doesn't win if we don't let it." The community rallied around the mural, organizing a cleanup and repainting event. This time, even more people showed up, including those who had previously stayed silent. By the end of the day, the mural was not only restored but enhanced, with new additions that symbolized resilience and unity. As the family reflected on their journey, they began to see how far they had come, not just as individuals but as a unit. Ava's confidence had grown immensely, and she often used her voice to inspire others. Mikey, once shy and unsure, had become a compassionate and thoughtful young leader. Karen had found her calling in advocacy, and Samuel had cemented his role as a guiding force for change. One evening, the family gathered on their porch, watching the sunset. Karen sipped her tea, and Ava doodled in her sketch pad while Mikey played with the family dog. "This feels peaceful," Karen said, breaking the comfortable silence. "It is," Samuel agreed, leaning back in his chair. "And it's because of all the hard work we've put in, not just out there, but in here." He gestured to the family around him. Ava looked up from her sketch pad, a small smile on her lips. "You think we've really made a difference, Dad?" Samuel nodded. "Absolutely. And the best part? This is just the beginning." The family's transformation mirrored the broader change they had inspired in their community. While challenges still existed, the Jenkins family had proven that growth was possible, not only for individuals, but for entire communities. The Jenkins family's life began to find a new rhythm, one marked by a balance of advocacy, community involvement, and moments of cherished normalcy. But just as they were beginning to feel a sense of stability, an unexpected challenge emerged, threatening to undo much of the progress they had fought so hard to achieve. One morning, as Samuel was preparing for a committee meeting, his phone buzzed with a call from Sarah, the former waitress from Main Street Eats. "Samuel, I need to talk to you," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. "What's wrong?" he asked, setting down his briefcase. "It's Mark," Sarah said. "He's been acting strange lately, almost paranoid. I overheard him talking to someone about trying to set the record straight and undo everything the committee's done. I don't know what he's planning, but it doesn't sound good." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Thank you for letting me know, Sarah. I'll look into it." At the next diversity committee meeting, Samuel brought up Sarah's concerns. The members exchanged worried glances. "What could Mark possibly do?" one member asked. "He's been cooperating with us for months." "I'm not sure," Samuel admitted, "but we need to be prepared. If he's feeling cornered, he might try something drastic to regain control or shift the narrative." Karen, who had recently joined the committee as an advisor, spoke up. "We should reach out to the community and reinforce the importance of the work we've done. If he's trying to sow doubt, we can counter it with transparency and unity." The group agreed, planning a series of public forums to highlight their progress and gather feedback from residents. Meanwhile, Ava noticed a change in her father's demeanor. He seemed more guarded, his mind preoccupied even during their family dinners. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked one evening as they cleared the table. Samuel hesitated before nodding. "I'm fine, Ava. Just dealing with a few challenges at work." She wasn't convinced. "Is it about the committee?" Samuel sighed, setting down the dishes. "It might be, but don't worry. We've faced bigger obstacles before. We'll handle this too." Ava nodded, though a sense of unease lingered. A week later, the first public forum was held at the community center. Residents packed the room, eager to share their thoughts and hear updates from the committee. The atmosphere was positive, with many attendees praising the initiatives that had been implemented. But toward the end of the forum, a commotion erupted at the back of the room. Mark Higgins entered, flanked by a few disgruntled-looking individuals. He approached the microphone, his face tense with barely contained frustration. "I've got something to say," he announced, his voice sharp. The room fell silent as Samuel exchanged a glance with Karen. Mark began to speak, accusing the committee of overstepping its bounds and unfairly targeting local businesses. "This whole thing has gone too far," he said. "You're trying to fix problems that don't exist and making honest people like me look like villains." The crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others shaking their heads. Samuel rose from his seat, walking calmly to the stage. Taking the microphone, he addressed the room with the same measured tone that had always served him well. "Mark, I understand your frustration," Samuel said. "Change is difficult, and it's natural to feel uncomfortable when we're forced to confront things we'd rather not see. But the truth is, These issues do exist. They're real, and they've affected people in ways you might not fully understand. Mark scoffed. Easy for you to say. You've turned this into your personal crusade. Samuel looked out at the audience. This isn't about me, he said. It's about all of us. It's about creating a community where everyone feels they belong. And if we disagree on how to get there, let's have that conversation. But let's do it with respect and a shared goal of progress. The room erupted into applause, leaving Mark visibly flustered. He stormed out, muttering under his breath. In the days that followed, Mark's outburst backfired. The public forums continued, with even more residents showing up to express their support for the committee's work. Sarah, who had distanced herself from Mark after the initial incident, spoke out publicly, sharing her perspective on the changes she'd witnessed at Main Street Eats. Samuel and the committee didn't just help our community, they helped me grow as a person, Sarah said during an interview with the local news. We can't let fear undo the progress we've made. The heightened tension reached its peak when Mark attempted to organize a counter-protest outside the town hall. However, the turnout was small, and many of those who attended left after realizing the movement lacked direction. Samuel and the committee, meanwhile, continued to focus on their initiatives, refusing to be derailed by Mark's efforts. One evening, after a particularly long day, Samuel and Karen sat on the porch, reflecting on the events of the past few weeks. Do you think this is the end of it? Karen asked, her voice tired but hopeful. Samuel looked out at the quiet street. I think it's the beginning of something better. Mark and others like him may resist, but they can't stop progress. Not when so many people are standing together. Karen smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. You've done something incredible, Samuel, and no matter what happens, we'll face it together. The weeks following Mark Higgins' failed counter-protest were a whirlwind of activity for the Jenkins family and the Diversity Committee. The heightened public attention made their work both more impactful and more scrutinized. Samuel's calm and measured leadership continued to earn respect, but the underlying tension with Mark reached a boiling point. One evening, during a committee meeting at the town hall, Sarah burst into the room, her face pale with urgency. Mark's filed a formal complaint against the committee, she said, handing Samuel a folder. He's claiming that our initiatives are hurting local businesses and violating their rights. Samuel flipped through the papers, his jaw tightening. This is a last-ditch effort, he said. He's trying to dismantle everything we've built. Karen, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. What does this mean for the committee? It means we'll have to defend ourselves, Samuel replied. He's forcing a public hearing. If the council sides with him, all our work could be undone. The news spread quickly, reigniting the debate in the community. Supporters of the committee rallied, organizing petitions and writing letters to the town council. Meanwhile, Mark's small but vocal group continued to push back, accusing the committee of overreach. As the hearing approached, the Jenkins family prepared for what felt like a defining moment. Samuel spent hours reviewing the committee's work, ensuring every initiative was backed by data and community input. Ava, determined to contribute, created a video showcasing testimonials from residents who had benefited from the committee's efforts. This isn't just about us, she said as she edited the footage. It's about everyone we've helped. Karen worked behind the scenes, coordinating with other committee members to gather support. Mikey, though younger, offered his own contribution by drawing posters that read, "Unity for all," and "Change is worth it," which he proudly displayed in their front yard. The day of the hearing arrived, and the town hall was packed. The tension in the air was palpable as residents filled every seat, their voices a murmur of anticipation. The Jenkins family sat together at the front, their presence a symbol of the fight for fairness and progress. Mark, flanked by his supporters, opened the hearing with a fiery speech. "This committee has gone too far," he declared. "They've turned our town into a battleground, forcing businesses to comply with unnecessary regulations and dividing our community." He presented his arguments, citing financial hardships faced by some businesses as evidence of the committee's negative impact. His words drew scattered applause, but the overall reaction was subdued. When it was Samuel's turn to speak, he rose with quiet confidence. He began by recounting the origins of the committee, emphasizing its collaborative and transparent approach. "This committee was created to address real issues that were harming members of our community," he said. Our work has been guided by one simple principle: fairness. Every initiative we've implemented has been aimed at making this town a better place for everyone, not just a select few. He presented data showing the positive impact of the committee's efforts, including increased community engagement and improved business relationships with diverse clientele. But this isn't just about numbers, Samuel continued. It's about people, real people whose lives have been changed because this town chose to care. He stepped aside as Ava's video played on a large screen. The room fell silent as testimonials from residents, young and old, from all walks of life, filled the air. I used to feel invisible in this town, one woman said, but because of the committee, I finally feel seen. Working with the committee taught me so much about inclusivity, Sarah added in the video. It's made me a better person and a better employee. The video ended with a message. Change is hard, but it's worth it. Together, we can build a better future. The room erupted into applause, drowning out any murmurs of dissent. As the council deliberated, the tension in the room was electric. Samuel held Karen's hand, their fingers interlocked in silent solidarity. Ava and Mikey sat beside them, their faces a mix of anxiety and hope. After what felt like an eternity, the council returned with their decision. The Diversity Committee's work has clearly made a positive impact on our community, the council president announced. We reject the complaint and fully support the continuation of their initiatives. The room exploded in cheers. Karen hugged Samuel tightly, tears streaming down her face. Ava and Mikey joined in, their joy infectious. Mark slumped in his seat, his defeat evident. As he left the hall, he glanced back at Samuel, his expression a mix of resentment and begrudging respect. Samuel met his gaze with a nod, choosing to rise above the conflict. The hearing's outcome solidified the committee's position and inspired even more community involvement. New volunteers joined their efforts, and local businesses began embracing the principles of inclusivity more openly. For the Jenkins family, it was a moment of triumph, not just for their work, but for the values they held dear. The victory at the hearing marked a turning point, not just for the committee, but for the entire town. The message was clear: progress would not be halted, and the community would continue to grow together. For the Jenkins family, it was a deeply satisfying affirmation of everything they had worked for. In the weeks following the decision, the town buzzed with renewed energy. New projects were launched under the committee's guidance, including mentorship programs for young people and partnerships between local businesses and schools to promote cultural exchange. The mural in the town square became a symbol of resilience, with people adding new elements to it over time, a living testament to the community's ongoing journey. One evening, the Jenkins family decided to celebrate their collective achievements with a small backyard gathering. Karen had strung up fairy lights, and the aroma of grilled vegetables and burgers wafted through the air. Friends, neighbors, and committee members joined them, laughing and sharing stories under the warm glow of the lights. As the night went on, Ava stood up, holding a glass of sparkling cider. "I just want to say something," she began, her voice clear and confident. The crowd quieted, turning their attention to her. "A few months ago, I wasn't sure any of this was worth it," Ava admitted. "It felt like no matter what we did, there were always going to be people who didn't want to see us succeed. But tonight, looking around at all of you, I know it was worth it. Because we didn't just stand up for what's right, we stood up together, and that's what makes this so special." The crowd erupted into applause, and Samuel couldn't help but smile. Ava had grown so much over the past year, and in that moment he saw a leader in the making. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, Samuel and Karen sat together on the porch, watching the stars. "We've come a long way," Karen said, resting her head on Samuel's shoulder. "We have," Samuel agreed, "but there's still more to do." Karen chuckled softly. "You're not going to let yourself relax for even a second, are you?" Samuel smiled, his gaze steady. "Not when there's still work to be done. But for tonight, I think we can take a moment to appreciate what we've accomplished." Karen nodded, squeezing his hand. "We've built something strong, Samuel. Not just for us, but for everyone." "For everyone," Samuel echoed, his voice filled with quiet determination. In the months that followed, the Jenkins family continued to lead by example, balancing their advocacy with the joys of everyday life. Ava thrived in her leadership role on the committee, while Mikey found his passion in helping others through art and community projects. Karen's support group grew into a regional network, empowering families across the state to share their stories and drive change. And Samuel, ever the steady presence, remained a beacon of hope and resilience for those around him. The town, once marked by division, had transformed into a model of inclusivity and collaboration. While challenges still arose, the community faced them with a newfound sense of unity. The Jenkins family's story became a source of inspiration, not just locally, but nationally, proving that even in the face of adversity, meaningful change was possible. A year after the public hearing, the Jenkins family stood in front of the mural in the town square, now a vibrant and intricate masterpiece that spanned the entire wall. New additions depicted the community's shared values, symbols of equality, hands joined together, and bright, hopeful imagery of a town united. Mikey pointed to a corner of the mural where he had painted a small family under a radiant sun. "That's us," he said proudly. Karen smiled, pulling him into a hug. "It's perfect." Ava snapped a picture with her phone, capturing the moment. "I can't believe how far we've come," she said, her voice filled with awe. "This mural, it's not just art, it's a story. Our story." Samuel placed a hand on her shoulder. "And it's still being written." As they stood together, residents passed by, some waving, others stopping to admire the mural. The Jenkins family's journey had left a lasting mark, not just on the town but on everyone who had been touched by their courage and determination. That evening, as the sun set over the town, Ava posted the mural's picture online with a simple caption: "Change begins with a single step. Together we've taken many, and the journey continues." The story of the Jenkins family is a powerful reminder of what can be achieved when courage, unity, and determination come together. But their journey doesn't have to end here. It can inspire action far beyond this community. What did this story make you feel or reflect on? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your insights in the comments, and let's start a meaningful conversation about change and inclusivity. If this story resonated with you, share it with others who might find it inspiring. Together, we can amplify the message and encourage others to take small steps that lead to big differences. Let's keep the journey alive. Like, comment, and share this story to spark the change we all want to see.